The wind swept across the rugged terrain of the Cambrian mountains, whispering through the valleys and stirring the heather that blanketed the slopes. Sarah and Michael, an American couple with a shared passion for adventure and photography, embarked on a hiking expedition through this remote corner of Wales. They'd heard about the landscape through an article by George Monbiot, a British ecologist that argues that the 300-kilometre squared area is somewhat of a desert, devoid of any noteworthy wildlife. Always up for a challenge, the couple decided on a vacation to explore the Welsh countryside and local heritage, hoping to come across some undiscovered natural oasis. As they trudged along the narrow trail, their spirits were high with anticipation. Armed with their camera equipment and a sense of wanderlust, they were hopeful that their journey would lead them to capture breathtaking landscapes and rare glimpses of wildlife. "It's so quiet here," Sarah remarked, her voice carrying on the breeze. "I expected more life?" Michael nodded, adjusting the straps of his backpack. "Yeah, it's like everything's frozen in time. But who knows, maybe we'll stumble across something really cool." They continued their hike, exchanging stories of past adventures and sharing dreams of the shots they'd hoped to capture. Michael was very eager to get a picture of his favourite bird, the European kingfisher, its dazzling blue feathers playing on his mind. Sarah, ever the plant lady, was just hoping to see a very old oak. Some in this country were apparently older than the United States itself. The desolation of the landscape was palpable, though. Yet they remained optimistic, eager to uncover the hidden beauty they believed lay waiting to be discovered. Hours passed, and they had no specific location they wanted to travel. They just picked a direction and walked. Unfortunately, as the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows over the barren hills, Sarah checked the map, furrowing her brow as she tried to orient herself. "I think we took a wrong turn," she admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Michael scanned the surroundings, his gaze sweeping over the vast expanse of supposed wilderness. "It all looks the same out here," he replied, a hint of concern creeping into his tone. "Let's backtrack a little. Maybe you can find a way out." But retracing their steps proved futile, as the landscape seemed to shift and warp, leading them deeper into the labyrinth of mountains. Soon enough, twilight descended, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold as they pressed on, their sense of direction slipping away with each passing moment. "We should have seen something by now," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Michael nodded grimly, his thoughts mirroring her own. "We'll figure it out. It's not exactly anything dangerous out here, unless there's an angry bull or something," he said, though doubt lingered in his mind. Lost in the vastness of the Cambrian mountains, surrounded by a silence that seemed to swallow them whole, Sarah and Michael realized that their journey had taken an unexpected turn, as the darkness threatened to envelop the land. They knew that their adventure was far from over. With each step, Sarah and Michael's sense of unease grew. They fumbled with their phones, desperate for a signal that would connect them to the outside world, but their screens remained stubborn, unable to show any bars. "We're completely cut off out of here," Sarah muttered, her fingers tapping futilely on the screen. Michael's jaw tightened with frustration as he pocketed his phone. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice resolute. "Maybe if we reach a higher ground, we'll have better luck with reception? I don't know. We didn't even have this problem in Wekua. You know, down in Florida." "I remember that. You got spooked by a gator. It was just chilling, but you're so freaked out." "Well, forgive me for not trusting something that could crush my head like it was nothing. And it outlived the dinosaurs." "Well, not all of them. We still have birds." "Not this again." "You're a bird guy. You should know this." "I do know it. You just don't have to point it out. It's weird." "Well, let's keep going then." They pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence that enveloped them. The landscape seemed to stretch endlessly, a vast expanse of desolation that swallowed them whole. As they crested a rise, their eyes fell upon a scene that was bizarre. Before them lay a scorched patch of earth, blackened and barren, as if a fire had swept through there mercilessly with fury. "What could have done this?" Sarah breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Michael shook his head, his gaze drawn to the scattered shapes that littered the ground within. Drawing closer, they discovered the grisly remains of sheep, their bodies charred and partially consumed. A sense of dread settled over them as they realized the magnitude of what they had stumbled upon. The wilderness that initially seemed desolate now harbored something dangerous.
It could have been teenagers or something.
Yeah, really messed up teenagers.
Maybe. Doesn't look like kids have a lot to do out here.
Well, if there's kids out here setting sheep on fire, I don't want to meet them. They sound like psychos.
Well, I agree. We need to get out of here.
Michael nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. But as they turned to retrace their steps, a low growl echoed throughout the night air, freezing them in their tracks. As the eerie growl reverberated throughout the still air, Sarah and Michael's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they strained to see through the dim light. Then Sarah's gaze fell upon something unsettling amidst the scorched landscape. She knelt down, her fingers tracing the outline of a large, vaguely bird-like print etched into the burnt grass.
"Michael, look at this,"
she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fascination. Michael joined her, his eyes widening as he examined the prints. They were massive, far larger than any bird they had ever seen or heard of. But there aren't any birds that large alive today. Hell, I don't even know of anything extinct that was this big, Michael murmured, his mind racing with disbelief. Sarah nodded, her thoughts mirroring his own.
"It's like something out of a myth or legend. Maybe it's a hoax, kids not much to do and all that.
I suppose that's them growling out there too.
Maybe they have a Bluetooth speaker."
Their minds raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Could there be some ancient creature lurking in the depths of the mountains? A remnant of a time long forgotten? As they pondered the implications of their discovery, the sound of movement in the distance snapped them back to reality. With a sense of urgency, they scrambled to their feet, their instincts screaming at them to flee whatever unseen danger lurked nearby. Relief flooded through Sarah and Michael as they stumbled upon a large herd of sheep grazing peacefully in the twilight. The sight of living creatures amidst the desolation of the mountains was a welcome reprieve from the eerie silence that had surrounded them.
"We're not alone,"
Sarah murmured, a sense of gratitude washing over. Michael nodded, his gaze scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. "Let's follow the trail and see where it leads us," he suggested, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. They continued on, the bleating of sheep serving as a comfortable backdrop to their journey. As dusk descended, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, a faint glimmer of light caught their attention in the distance.
"Look!"
Sarah exclaimed, pointing towards the source of the light.
"There's a farmhouse over there."
Heartened by the prospect of shelter and assistance, they quickened their pace, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path that led towards the distant glow. With each step, the light grew brighter, beckoning them closer like a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. As they approached the farmhouse, its weathered walls illuminated by the warm glow of lamplight, a sense of relief washed over them. They hurried to the door and knocked, their hearts pounding with anticipation. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a weather-beaten farmer peering out at them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He had a long grey beard and a balding head.
"Can I help you?"
he asked, his voice gruff yet not unkind. Breathless and weary from their ordeal, Sarah and Michael exchanged a glance before Michael spoke up.
"We're lost,"
he admitted, his voice tinged with embarrassment.
"We were hiking through the mountains and got turned around. We saw your light and hoped you might be able to help us."
The farmer's expression softened as he regarded them with sympathy.
"Come in then,"
he said, stepping aside to allow them entry.
"You're lucky you found me. These mountains can be treacherous for those who don't know their way."
As the farmer led Sarah and Michael into the cozy interior of the farmhouse, they were enveloped by a warmth of a crackling fire and the scent of home-cooked meals. Despite their gratitude for the shelter, a sense of unease lingered in the air as they settled in around the farmer's kitchen table.
"We appreciate your kindness,"
Sarah began, her voice hesitant as she broached the topic that had been weighing on her mind.
"But we couldn't help but notice you have a lot of sheep. I've never seen so many, especially with such low grass to go around."
The farmer's expression hardened slightly at the mention of the sheep, and he let out a gruff sigh before responding.
"Aye, we have a lot of sheep,"
he admitted, his tone tinged with irritation.
"But they're necessary around here."
Michael frowned, sensing the farmer's reluctance to elaborate.
"But why so many sheep? Where are all the trees and forests that, you could expect to find around a place like this?"
The farmer's gaze flickered with something akin to fear before he averted his eyes. His hands fidgeted with the hem of his coat.
"There are reasons,"
he muttered cryptically, his voice barely above a whisper.
"Reasons that are best left unspoken."
Sarah and Michael exchanged a puzzled glance, their curiosity piqued by the farmer's cryptic words. Before they could press him for more information, however, a sudden commotion outside drew their attention. The sound of panicked bleating filled the air as the farmer rushed to the window, his face etched with concern.
"Not again,"
he muttered under his breath, his hands balling into fists at his side. Sarah and Michael exchanged a worried glance, their minds racing with questions.
"What's happening?"
Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The farmer's jaw clenched with determination as he turned to face them, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve.
"There are things out in these hills. Things that take what they want without mercy. Things that we dare not speak of. Now don't you mind. I'll go see to it. You go to bed, and I'll see you in the morning. And whatever you do, don't go outside after dark. You hear me?"
They agreed, his cautionary words echoing in their minds as they settled into their makeshift beds for the night. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows across the dimly lit room, the only source of warmth and comfort in the silent farmhouse. As they lay awake, the events of the day replayed in their minds, each moment tinged with a sense of foreboding. Outside, the night was alive with strange noises that seemed to dance on the edge of their consciousness. Michael fidgeted. He sat up looking out the window. Sarah, knowing where her husband's mind was wandering, cut him off by saying,
"We should heed the farmer's warning and stay inside,"
her voice barely audible in the darkness. Michael nodded in agreement, though his thoughts consumed by the mysteries that surround them.
"Yeah, we'll wait till morning, then we'll make our way to the nearest village."
Despite their exhaustion, sleep eluded them as they lay awake, their senses heightened by the unfamiliar surroundings. The hours stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity as they listened to the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. As they lay there in the darkness of the farmhouse, the night seemed to hold its breath, a tense stillness broken only by the distant sounds of frightened sheep and occasional flashes of light in the distance. Each noise sent a shiver down their spines, their imaginations running wild with fear and uncertainty. Eventually, they were unable to ignore the commotion. Sarah and Michael exchanged a nervous glance before silently agreeing to investigate. With trembling hands, they crept to the window, their hearts pounding in their chests as they peered out into the night. Still, from that vantage point, they were unable to see clearly. It was stained glass of the Good Shepherd Jesus, obscuring everything beyond. So they tiptoed to the front door, taking a few paces outside. What they saw defied belief. In the dim light flickering through the clouds, they could faintly make out the silhouette of a massive creature soaring through the sky. Its wings seemed to span the distance between the mountains, and its body glowed with an otherworldly light as it swooped down and seized a burning sheep in its talons. Sarah and Michael gasped in horror, their minds struggling to comprehend the sight before them. It was like seeing something out of a fairy tale or a myth. A creature come to life in a desolate land.
"It's a dragon,"
Sarah breathed, her voice barely a whisper. For a moment, Michael couldn't respond, his eyes wide with disbelief.
"It's unbelievable,"
he muttered, his voice tinged with fear.
"We have to get back inside."
With a sense of urgency, they tore their gaze away from the surreal scene unfolding outside and hurried back into the safety of the farmhouse. They huddled together in the darkness, their hearts still racing with adrenaline as they tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The rest of the night passed in a blur of fear and uncertainty as they waited for the first light of dawn to break through the darkness. When morning finally arrived, Sarah and Michael emerged from their hiding place, their minds reeling with the impossible truth of what they had seen. As if from nowhere, the farmer appeared, startling them in their insomniatic state.
"You sleep well?"
he asked.
Yes, thank you very much. It was very comfortable,"
Michael lied as he feigned stretching.
"Well, you best get ready. I'm about to head out."
They swiftly got dressed, doing their best to put the dragon into the back of their mind. If they mentioned it to the farmer, he'd think they were crazy, unless he knew something about it. Perhaps he did. Perhaps that's what he was trying to hide. Still, for now, to save their own sanity, they got dressed quickly and into the back of his car. As Sarah and Michael rode with the farmer towards the nearest village, their minds raced with the thoughts of the dragon. Despite the thin light of dawn illuminating the landscape, the memory of the creature's sickly appearance lingered in their minds, filling them with a sense of unease.
"We have to be careful,"
Sarah whispered to Michael, her voice tinged with apprehension.
"Something didn't look right about it. The dragon, it didn't look well, did it? Who knows what it's capable of?"
Michael nodded grimly, his eyes scanning around for any sign of the creature. "Yeah, I don't know how a dragon's supposed to look, but oh no. Just something didn't seem right about it. You could see its ribs, and it's flying. Again, I don't know how it's supposed to fly, but it looked really hard, like it didn't want to beat its wings too much, like it was a lot of effort to even be off the ground." As that thought crossed his mind, their hopes of a quiet journey were shattered moments later, as a deafening roar filled the air, followed by the sounds of the massive wings beating against the sky. Sarah and Michael's hearts leapt into their throats as they turned to see the creature swooping towards them with terrifying speed.
"It's not supposed to be out during the day,"
the farmer shouted.
"Look out, brace yourselves!"
His voice drowned out by the roar of the creature. Before they could react, the creature slammed into the vehicle with incredible force, sending it careening off the road, flipping it onto its side. Sarah and Michael were thrown out like rag dolls, their screams drowned out by the sound of twisting metal and shattering glass. As the chaos subsided, Sarah and Michael found themselves dazed and disoriented amidst the wreckage of the vehicle. The farmer lay unconscious nearby, his face contorted in pain as blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. Despite the force of which they were flung from the vehicle, miraculously, they were relatively unscathed. Quickly they saw to the farmer's injuries, getting him to his feet. Backing away from the wreckage further, they locked their eyes with the sickly dragon, The elephant-sized animal prowled around the overturned vehicle. Despite the creature's intimidating presence, they couldn't help but feel a pang of pity as they watched it struggle to move, its breath ragged and its movements unsteady.
It's really not well?
Sarah murmured, her voice tinged with empathy as she exchanged a worried glance with Michael. Something in Michael's eyes seemed to agree with her without a word. His gaze fixed on the dragon as it continued to walk around the car, its movements growing increasingly erratic.
Can't believe I'm going to say this, but poor thing,
he whispered, his heart aching at the sight of the once majestic and terrifying creature in such a pitiful state. With cautious steps, they edged away from the car further, keeping an eye on the reptile, as it seemed to pay them little attention, its focus consumed by its futile attempts to further damage the vehicle. As they moved farther away from the wreckage, Sarah and Michael doing their best to keep the farmer standing, they couldn't shake the feeling of unease that hung in the air. The creature's behavior was unlike anything they had expected, its actions driven by something other than aggression or malice.
What do you think's going on?
Sarah whispered. I don't know, Michael admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty.
But we need to get out of here before that thing decides to turn its attention back to us.
Quickly, the three of them fled as fast as they could into the surrounding wilderness, their minds filled with a mixture of fear and a tinge of compassion for the mysterious creature. After a while, the punch-drunk father came fully to. Still, the couple did their best to support him, not wanting him to relapse and fall onto the grass. Together they continued their journey through the rugged landscape, the farmer doing his best to meander towards the village. But eventually their path led them to a rocky crevasse nestled amidst the barren hills. The telltale signs of scorch marks marred the rocky walls, hinting at the violence that had unfolded within.
It's not a good idea to go over there,
the farmer reminded them, though curiosity was overwhelming.
Just a moment. You know, we have to act like dumb tourists whilst we're here.
Michael chuckled at that. Hey, we are American after all. Rolling his eyes, the farmer begrudgingly followed them as they approached the crevice cautiously. Their hearts were heavy with trepidation as they peered inside. What they saw left them speechless, with horror and with sorrow. As their eyes came across the bones of sheep, the farmer's fists clenched, but then softened again when their eyes came across something else. There amongst the remains of sheep and the occasional deer lay the emaciated bodies of what appeared to be 2 infant dragons. Their once majestic forms now reduced to little more than skeletal husks. Their scales were dull and lifeless, their wings folded limply against their sides as if in a final futile attempt to shield themselves from the harsh reality of their existence. Despite all they had been through, and the fear that was still somewhat pumping through their veins, tears welled up in Sarah and Michael's eyes as they beheld the tragic sight before them, the magnitude of the creature's suffering weighing heavily on their hearts.
You know about these things. What's wrong with them?
Sarah said, her voice choked with emotion as she turned to the farmer for guidance. The farmer's expression was one of sorrow and regret as he regarded the pitiful creatures before him.
Those poor souls,
he murmured, his voice heavy with grief.
They're some of the last of their kind, punted to extinction by man's greed and ignorance.
He went on to explain how the dragons had once thrived in the lush rainforests of Wales, their existence intertwined with the delicate balance of the ecosystem. But after centuries of human interference and destruction had left their habitat in ruins, the creatures were driven to the brink of extinction.
These whelps were likely suffering from severe inbreeding and malnutrition, the farmer continued, his voice filled with anguish. They were born into a world that could no longer sustain them, doomed to suffer a slow and agonizing demise. That's probably why she's been after my sheep so much. There's not much to go around here. Even then, there's probably not everything she needs in a sheep, but her instincts are telling her to hunt, eat whatever she can. You know, I hated her for so long. I just saw her as a bloody great big pest.
Sarah and Michael could only stand in silent reverence as they mourned the loss of these magnificent creatures, their hearts heavy with the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded before them. They gazed upon the starved remains of the reptiles, a sob caught in their throats. As Sarah, Michael, and the farmer slowly backed away from the rocky crevice, their hearts filled with sorrow for the fallen babies, they were suddenly jolted by the return of their mother. She had followed them from the car, seeming to walk instead of fly, her lumbering steps slowing as she got closer, growling with a mother's rage. At first, the creature appeared angry, her massive wings spreading wide in a threatening display. But as she attempted to raise herself up, it became painfully evident that she was far too weakened and exhausted to pose any real threat. Instead, the mother dragon lowered herself to the ground with a heavy thud, her movements slow and labored. With a heartbreaking tenderness, she slinked past the humans, seeming to completely ignore them now, panting like a dog that had been left in a hot car. She crawled on her belly towards her fallen offspring, her movements guided by a maternal instinct that transcended her own suffering. She nestled beside her dead babies, nuzzling them gently as though they were still alive. Tears began to stream down Sarah and Michael's faces as they watched the poignant scene unfold before them. The farmer's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he bore witness to the tragic bond between mother and child, a bond that even death could not sever. With one last glance at the humans, the mother dragon's beautiful amber eyes seemed to focus on them with a mixture of sadness and resignation. She let out a heavy sigh, her breathing quickening for a moment before slowly subsiding. And then, in a final act of heartbreaking devotion, the mother lay down completely beside her dead babies, her body going still as death finally claimed her. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the anguished sobs of the humans who bore witness to the tragic end of a noble creature and her precious offspring. Sarah, Michael, and the farmer stood in stunned silence, their hearts encased in grief as they mourned the loss of the majestic dragons before them, perhaps the very last dragons in the world. In that moment, amidst the desolate landscape of the Cambrian mountains, they bore witness to a tragedy that would forever haunt their memories, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of balance. With tears in his eyes, the farmer vowed to care for the land, dedicating the rest of his life to regrowing the lost forests and adopting traditional cattle farming methods in a place of unsustainable sheep farming that had ravished the landscape for centuries. His commitment to stewardship filled Sarah and Michael with admiration, a testament to the power of redemption and renewal in the face of devastation. As they prepared to part ways, Sarah and Michael found themselves forever changed by their experience in the Cambrian mountains. With a newfound appreciation for the wilderness, they returned to their own corner of the world, determined to make a difference in their own wild places. Eventually, they both became rangers in their local state park, dedicating themselves to educating others about the dangers of overexploitation and the importance of preserving natural habitats for future generations. Their voices echoed through the forests and mountains, a testament to the enduring legacy of the dragons and the interconnectedness of all living things. And though they came away with some scrapes, bumps, and bruises, and some unseen mental scarring from their experience, Sarah, Michael, and the farmer found solace in the knowledge that their actions would help ensure that the tragic fate of the Cambrian dragons would not be in vain. For in the end, it was their commitment to stewardship and conservation that would ensure the survival of the wilderness they all now held so very dear.